The Texas 7, when convicts took over a town, the breakout. Don't forget to subscribe, because this isn't fiction. It's the real story of 7 men who escaped hell and turned Texas upside down. It began on December 13, 2000, inside the John B. Connally Unit, a maximum security prison in Kennedy, Texas. The air was thick with the sound of machinery, echoing footsteps, and the faint metallic hum of prison life, predictable, monotonous, and deadly quiet. But not for 7 inmates who refused to die behind bars. Each of them had been sentenced for violent crimes. Each was serving decades, even life. And together, they were about to become infamous. George Rivas, the ringleader, a former military-trained robber with intelligence and precision. Joseph Garcia, quiet but deadly, serving a 50-year sentence for murder. Michael Rodriguez, once a police officer's son, now locked up for capital murder. Along with Larry Harper, Donald Newberry, Randy Halpern, and Patrick Murphy, they called themselves simply, the Texas 7. For weeks, they'd studied guard rotations, equipment movements, and weak spots in security. Rivas had built a plan, one that required military coordination, deception, and absolute control. It started in the maintenance area. The inmates were assigned to work detail that day, painting, wiring, and fixing pipes. They waited until the right moment, just after noon, when the yard was quiet and the guards had let their vigilance slip. Rivas moved first. He distracted a guard, asking for supplies. When the guard turned his back, another inmate, Harper, struck him from behind. Within seconds, they had him bound, gagged, and stripped of his uniform. They moved with precision. They overpowered more guards, using radios, fake voices, and handcuffs to their advantage. They spoke with authority, bluffing through checkpoints. Each capture was silent, quick, efficient. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was already too late. Inside a nearby supply closet, they tied and blindfolded 11 officers and civilian workers, locking them away. Some begged for mercy. Rivas simply told them, "Stay quiet. We're not here to kill anyone, unless we have to." Dressed in stolen guard uniforms, the 7 convicts loaded stolen weapons, cash, and supplies into a prison maintenance truck. They rolled toward the exit gate, calm, controlled, confident. At the gate, the real guards didn't even blink. It was routine, a work detail truck leaving for repair runs. Rivas gave a nod, flashed a fake work order, and they were waved through. The truck passed the final fence. The gates opened. The Texas 7 vanished into the cold December air. They had just pulled off one of the most elaborate prison escapes in modern American history, without a single shot fired. But freedom was only the beginning. Within hours, the prison went into lockdown. Alarms blared across the state. Helicopters hovered over fields. The warden's voice cracked as he reported to the press, "We've had a complete breach. 7 maximum security inmates are at large." Every law enforcement agency in Texas, and soon the FBI, joined the manhunt. Checkpoints appeared on every highway. Posters with 7 mugshots were taped across gas stations and TV broadcasts. But the Texas 7 had planned their next move long before the breakout. They hijacked cars, switched license plates, and stole weapons from abandoned houses. Rivas led them north, toward San Antonio. They hid in parking lots, slept in stolen vehicles, and robbed stores for supplies. They knew the odds. They weren't trying to hide forever, they wanted to survive long enough to hit one big score. That's when Rivas proposed the plan that would change everything. They would rob a store, not for money, but for power. A robbery to keep them alive. A robbery that would make them gods in the eyes of every convict watching the news. Late one night, as they camped out in a stolen RV near Dallas, Rivas gathered the group. "We've already crossed the line," he said. "The world's watching. Let's make it count." He wasn't talking about escape anymore. He was talking about dominance. A few days later, on Christmas Eve, 2000, the Texas 7 walked into an outdoor World sporting goods store in Irving, Texas. They were dressed in stolen security gear, armed with stolen pistols, and carried themselves like soldiers on a mission. The employees thought it was a routine inspection, until one of them saw the gun. In minutes, the store was under their control. They tied everyone up, looted weapons, ammunition, and cash. It was supposed to be another clean job. But fate doesn't care about plans. As the group loaded their loot, a police car pulled into the parking lot. Officer Aubrey Hawkins, a 29-year-old patrolman, responded to a silent alarm. He stepped out of his cruiser, flashlight raised, and walked straight into chaos. Shots rang out. Glass shattered. The night exploded with violence. When the smoke cleared, the Texas 7 were gone, and Officer Hawkins lay dead in the parking lot. The manhunt was no longer a pursuit. It was a war. And for the next month, every cop in America would be hunting the 7 men who had just crossed the line from escapees to killers. But what the authorities didn't know yet was that the Texas 7 already had another plan and a new disguise. Something no one would see coming. The hunt. The morning after the Irving shooting, Texas woke up to chaos. Televisions across the state blared breaking news: 7 escaped convicts now wanted for the murder of Officer Aubrey Hawkins. The mugshots of the Texas 7 filled every screen, and under each face, one word in bold red: armed and extremely dangerous. The manhunt became personal. Thousands of officers flooded highways, rest stops, and small towns. The FBI joined in. Helicopters patrolled rural skies. Billboards carried their faces. But as the whole world searched for them, the Texas 7 had already vanished. They had fled more than 300 miles north, into the small town of Woodland Park, Colorado, a quiet, snow-covered community tucked in the mountains. A town that wasn't ready for what was coming. For weeks, they lived like ghosts. They took over a trailer park under fake names, calling themselves a group of Christian missionaries. Rivas was now Mr. Brown, a preacher. The others played the roles of humble followers, polite and respectful. They read Bibles in public. They volunteered for small community tasks. To the townspeople, they seemed harmless, even kind. But behind those smiles, the 7 men were arming themselves. Inside the trailer, boxes of ammunition were stacked beside stolen rifles. Maps were spread across the table. They were preparing for something big, one final heist to secure their future. Rivas believed they could still win. "We can't go back," he told the group one night. "We're free men now. We just have to think like free men." But freedom was running out. While the men planned their next move, the police were closing in. Investigators traced phone records, stolen vehicles, and a string of robberies tied to the escapees. Every day, the circle got smaller. Then came the break. A woman named Deborah, who had befriended one of the fugitives, grew suspicious. She noticed inconsistencies, different names, vague backstories, nervous glances when police cars passed. When she saw one of their faces on TV, her blood ran cold. She called the authorities. Within hours, Colorado police and the FBI surrounded Woodland Park. Helicopters circled overhead. SWAT teams prepared to move in. Inside the trailer, Rivas and the others heard the rotors. They knew it was over. "Split up," Rivas ordered. "Don't get caught together." They grabbed their weapons, their cash, and ran into the freezing night. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they scattered into the dark woods. Some tried to blend in with nearby travelers, hitching rides, while others stole vehicles. 2 days later, a security camera caught their image, walking calmly into a motel off Interstate 25. Police were only an hour behind. The next morning, one of the fugitives, Donald Newberry, was spotted buying coffee at a gas station. When officers moved in, he pulled a gun. The standoff ended in minutes. He was taken alive, cursing and spitting as they dragged him to the ground. But the others were still at large. Meanwhile, in the mountains, Rivas sat inside a snow-covered SUV with Michael Rodriguez beside him. They listened to a police radio crackle with updates. They knew the end was near. Rivas looked out at the horizon, white fields, endless sky. "We made it longer than they said we would," he muttered. Rodriguez didn't answer. He was staring at a family photo taped to the dashboard, one he'd stolen from the trailer they'd lived in. By that night, another fugitive, Randy Halpern, was captured near a gas station in Colorado Springs. He surrendered quietly, hands shaking, eyes hollow. The Texas 7 were collapsing, one by one. Then, in a parking lot outside a Holiday Inn, officers surrounded a small silver SUV. Inside were Rivas, Rodriguez, and Harper. Through the windshield, officers could see Rivas reach for his gun. "Don't do it," they shouted. Rivas looked at Rodriguez, a silent nod between men who knew what was coming. Gunfire erupted. Glass shattered. When the smoke cleared, George Rivas was dead. Rodriguez and Harper were taken alive, bloodied and silent. Across the state, news broke instantly: leader of the Texas 7 killed in Colorado standoff. Citizens cheered. Officers cried. But the hunt wasn't over. One man, Patrick Murphy, had managed to slip away into the woods. For days, he evaded capture, living off scraps, hiding in abandoned sheds. But cold and hunger finally broke him. When police found him curled in a field, frost on his face, he didn't resist. And just like that, the Texas 7, the most wanted men in America, were done. All captured. All accounted for. All facing death. But the story didn't end with their arrests. Because when the trials began, what came out in court would shock even the most hardened investigators. The Texas 7 weren't just running from justice, they had a final message for the system that created them. The judgment. The winter snow had melted by the time the last of the Texas 7 were brought home in handcuffs. The manhunt was over. The escapees who once humiliated the Texas prison system were now facing the one thing even they couldn't outsmart: justice. From the moment they touched Texas soil, the state made one thing clear: there would be no sympathy, no mercy, no second chances. They had murdered a police officer on Christmas Eve. Now, Texas was ready to make an example of them. Inside the courthouse, reporters filled every seat. Photographers' flashes lit the room like lightning as the men were led in, each wearing the same orange jumpsuit, each cuffed at the wrists and ankles. The ringleader, George Rivas, was already dead, killed in a hail of gunfire in Colorado. But his words still echoed through the trial transcripts: "We were soldiers in a war. Just not the kind they understood." The others sat silently as prosecutors played grainy security footage from the Outdoor World robbery. It showed 7 men moving like shadows, swift, cold, organized. And then came the sound of gunfire. Officer Aubrey Hawkins had been ambushed, shot multiple times as he tried to stop the robbery. When his widow, Lori Hawkins, took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. She held up her husband's badge, still dented from the bullet that struck it. Her voice didn't tremble. "They didn't just kill a police officer," she said. "They killed a father, a son, and a piece of this state's soul." The jurors didn't look away. Neither did the defendants. But their faces, hard, unreadable, made the public furious. When the verdicts came down, one by one, they all heard the same words: guilty. Capital murder. All 6 surviving members of the Texas 7 were sentenced to death. The public called it justice. But for those who studied the case, it was more complicated. Psychologists described Rivas as a master manipulator, a man who blended charisma with control. He didn't break people, he convinced them to break themselves. Even inside the escape team, power had turned to paranoia. Testimonies revealed that some members, like Randy Halpern and Patrick Murphy, had tried to back out of the plan days before the robbery. But Rivas wouldn't let them. "He told us there was no going back," Halpern testified. "He said we'd already crossed the line." Years passed. Appeals were filed. 2 of the men, Michael Rodriguez and Donald Newberry, were executed first, both by lethal injection. The rest waited on death row at the Connally Unit, where lights never dim and time moves slower than death itself. But even there, the story wouldn't die. In 2019, nearly 2 decades after the escape, new controversy erupted. Attorneys for Randy Halpern argued that his trial judge had made racist remarks during sentencing, a potential violation of judicial ethics. Civil rights groups demanded a review. For a moment, the case that had once united Texas in anger now divided it in debate. Yet the truth remained: 7 men escaped, a police officer died, and the scars of that winter never fully healed. On December 24 each year, in the city of Irving, police still hold a memorial for Officer Hawkins. A single candle burns beside his photo. His son, now an adult, attends in silence. And sometimes, someone brings up the question that has haunted Texas for decades. What if they had never killed him? Would people remember them as criminals, or legends? But for those who lived it, there's no question. The Texas 7 weren't heroes. They were proof that desperation turns men into something colder, something beyond redemption. The final member, Patrick Murphy, sits in solitary confinement today. He has found religion, he says. He spends his days writing letters to victims' families, apologizing for what he calls a lifetime of misdirection. His letters always end the same way. I escaped once from a prison made of walls. Now I'm just trying to escape the one made of guilt. When asked years later what drove them to do it, an investigator who worked the case said something chilling. People think it was about freedom. But it wasn't. It was about power, the kind a man feels when he has nothing left to lose. The Texas 7 left behind a legacy of terror, headlines, and hard lessons for every prison in America. They exposed the system's cracks, and what happens when intelligence meets desperation. And even though 6 of them ended up back in cages, the story remains a grim reminder of one truth. You can lock up a body, but you can't always contain a mind. If you thought this escape was insane, wait until you hear about the prisoner who built a crime empire from inside his cell. Hit subscribe, because the next story goes deeper and darker than you can imagine.